In the wild, every day is a fight for survival. But sometimes nature surprises us in ways we never imagined. What happens when a baby elephant, orphaned and surrounded by lions, finds an unexpected guardian in the most unlikely hero? Today, I'll take you to the heart of Kenya's Masai Mara, where a story of courage, instinct, and astonishing compassion unfolded before my eyes. If you love witnessing the raw beauty of wildlife and stories that touch the heart, make sure to follow, like, and comment below, because this tale is one you won't forget. The morning sun had barely pierced the horizon when Japhet, my guide and a lifelong Maasai tracker, signaled that our jeep should veer off the dusty track. The radio call had been brief but urgent: lion activity near the Mara River. 20 years as a wildlife photographer, and I thought I had seen it all, yet that particular tone of caution from Japhet made my pulse quicken. This was not just another scene of wildebeest crossing or grazing elephants. It carried the weight of impending danger, something raw and unfiltered waiting to unfold. We bounced along the familiar trail, the jeep kicking up a haze of ochre dust, and I adjusted my telephoto lens, anticipating whatever nature had in store. The dry season had transformed the savanna into a mosaic of golden grasslands, broken by the dark blue ribbons of the Mara River. Water sources had grown scarce, pushing predators and prey alike into dangerously close proximity. The air already hummed with tension, and I could feel it in my bones. Today would be different. As we crested a small rise, the scene that unfolded below stole my breath. Not a herd of wildebeest, not grazing zebras, but a solitary elephant calf, trembling beside the lifeless body of what had once been its mother. Even from a distance, the grim reality was clear. The elephant had been poached. Its mother, tuskless and now stiff in death, lay sprawled on the parched earth. The calf, no more than a few months old, nudged her with its trunk, ears flared, and tiny eyes brimming with confusion. Its soft trumpet echoed across the savanna, a plaintive call that seemed to carry the weight of innocence confronting a world it was not yet prepared to understand. Japhet's voice, normally calm and measured, broke the stillness. "She was killed last night," he said softly. His eyes, always sharp and calculating, held a flicker of sadness. "The baby hasn't left her side." I lowered my camera briefly, the emotions clawing at me, but quickly remembered my role: to document, not to intervene. In all my years, I had never seen grief so raw, so immediate, etched into the behavior of an animal so young. Through the lens, I noticed movement at the edge of the tall grasses. 6 lions, a full pride including 2 males with thick, dark manes, were advancing with calculated stealth. Each muscle of their tawny bodies rippled under the morning sun as they moved closer. Their eyes locked on the orphaned calf. The precision of their approach was textbook predator behavior, a dance honed over generations, an instinct as old as time itself. My heart pounded against my ribs as I watched the circle tighten. Nature was impartial to grief, to innocence, to the helplessness of a creature still learning to stand. The elephant calf finally registered the threat. Its ears fanned outward, small yet defiant, and a desperate trumpet rang out, reverberating against the horizon. The call was for help, yet no help was near. In the distance, I could make out the small herd of elephants, perhaps half a mile away, moving away from the river. The baby's cries would never reach them in time. The lions circling became deliberate, each predator positioning itself to cut off potential escape routes. 2 lionesses flanked it from the left. The adult males approached head-on, while the younger subadults closed off the way toward the river. I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. I had witnessed countless hunts, but never one where a calf so vulnerable faced such an orchestrated threat. The baby pressed against its mother's lifeless body, as if seeking protection from something that could no longer shield it. Its tiny trunk reached out, touching the cold flesh of its mother, a futile gesture that pulled at my conscience. Japhet murmured beside me, "We should move," his voice taut with unease. I shook my head, unable to look away. "Just a few more minutes," I whispered. As a photographer, I knew that in those fleeting moments, I might witness behavior that defied all previous understanding. Lions rarely target elephants, even calves, unless opportunity or desperation force their hand. And yet, here it was, the raw intersection of life and death, an inevitable confrontation written by evolution itself. The lead lioness crouched, muscles coiled, her golden eyes narrowing in focus. The air was electric with anticipation. I tightened my grip on the camera, aware that any movement might shatter the delicate tension of the scene. The calf trumpeted once more, higher pitched, almost pleading. It was a sound that carried not only distress, but also a haunting clarity. Life clinging to the edge, seeking a miracle. At that moment, the miracle arrived. From the direction of the river came a thunderous splash and the sound of water displaced by a massive force. Through my viewfinder, I swung toward the disturbance, and my heart nearly stopped. Emerging from the river, water cascading from his enormous frame, was a male hippopotamus. 3 tons of sheer muscle charging directly toward the confrontation between lions and calf. I could hardly believe my eyes. Hippos are notoriously territorial, yes, and they can be aggressive within their own domain. But intervening in a predator-prey scenario involving a completely different species? That was unprecedented. Yet here he was, moving with astonishing speed, his enormous jaws opening in a threat display, aimed squarely at the apex predators closing in on the helpless elephant. The lions froze, unsure of how to respond to this colossal intruder, and the hippo did not hesitate. Positioning himself between the calf and the approaching pride, he became a living barricade. His eyes, small yet piercing, never left the lions. Another earth-shaking bellow reverberated across the savannah, a declaration of intent that seemed to bend the laws of nature itself. Japhet, usually stoic, whispered beside me, "Hippo protecting elephant calf. This is not in nature books." I could only nod, unable to articulate the magnitude of what I was witnessing. Nature, which had moments before seemed unforgiving and cruel, had suddenly produced a guardian. And in that instant, the orphaned calf, sensing a new protector, stopped its frantic trumpeting and huddled behind the hippo's massive frame, trunk brushing against its unexpected shield. Time slowed. For 20 minutes, the standoff continued. Lions tested their courage with tentative steps, but the hippo pivoted with precision, keeping himself a steadfast barrier. It was not random movement. It was deliberate protection. The sheer instinct, or perhaps something deeper, was astonishing. The calf's tiny frame shivered behind him, a mix of fear and relief, while I captured every second, aware that these images would challenge everything known about interspecies behavior. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the savannah. I glanced at Japhet, who shook his head in disbelief. "Nature always has mysteries, Michael," he said softly. I realized he was right. No textbook, no prior observation could have prepared me for this moment. Standing there, witnessing a creature so massive and seemingly indifferent act with what appeared as deliberate compassion, I felt a mixture of awe, respect, and profound humility. This was more than a hunt, more than survival. It was a reminder that in the wild, while the rules are unyielding, the unexpected can still rewrite the script. And in the heart of the Masai Mara, a tiny elephant calf had found salvation not in its own species, but in the form of a 3-ton guardian whose reasons, however mysterious, defied all conventional understanding. The morning light glinted off the hippo's wet hide, illuminating the immense bulk of his body as he stood between the calf and the pride of lions. Each ripple in the water cascading from his enormous frame seemed to pulse with raw energy, a warning to any predator that underestimated him. I had spent decades photographing wildlife in the African savanna, capturing the intimate details of predator hunts and herd dynamics, but nothing in my experience could have prepared me for this extraordinary display. The hippo's presence was not merely a passive interruption, it was an act of bold intervention that demanded respect. The lions, accustomed to the predictable rhythms of the hunt, faltered. Their previously confident steps slowed, ears flicking nervously, eyes darting between the 3-ton mammal and the vulnerable calf. I could almost sense their confusion. Apex predators rely on certainty, the expectation that their prey cannot resist. But here was an obstacle entirely outside their evolutionary assumptions. Even the lead lioness, who had crouched moments before, now hesitated, her muscles coiled but uncommitted. The dynamics of predator and prey had shifted in an instant, rewriting the rules of the standoff. The hippo, however, showed no sign of wavering. Each time a lion edged closer, he pivoted with surprising agility, keeping his massive frame squarely between the threat and the baby elephant. His jaw opened wide in repeated threat displays, a deafening rumble vibrating through the ground, a sound that seemed to reverberate in my chest. From a purely practical perspective, this behavior was unprecedented. Hippos are herbivores. They are not known to intervene on behalf of other species. Territorial disputes among hippos are common, and aggression toward intruders, humans, other hippos, crocodiles, is well documented. But here was an entirely new behavior. The baby elephant, recognizing this strange yet protective figure, seemed to find a tentative sense of security. Its trembling decreased slightly, and its trumpet became less frantic, though still vigilant. It pressed its tiny body against the hippo's massive flank, as if instinctively understanding that its new guardian was strong enough to repel the predators circling around them. I felt a lump rise in my throat. It was rare in the wild to witness such an apparent recognition of cross-species protection, especially between creatures whose evolutionary paths rarely intersect in this way. Time stretched. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. The lions, persistent yet cautious, began testing the limits of the hippo's tolerance. Two lionesses slunk through the tall grass, attempting to flank him from the side where the calf partially exposed itself. The hippo rotated, moving with a deliberate awareness that was astonishing. Every pivot, every minor step ensured that the calf remained shielded. It was as if he had an innate understanding of the risk vectors, an awareness that transcended instinct alone. I lowered my camera briefly, awe momentarily replacing my professional detachment. Japheth's voice was a hushed murmur beside me, filled with disbelief. "I've never seen this. It's as if he understands what's at stake." I nodded, unable to articulate more than a breathless agreement. Even for a veteran tracker like Japhet, this display defied conventional knowledge. The hippo's behavior suggested something remarkable. A deliberate, protective action, entirely atypical for a species known for aggression, yet rarely recognized for empathetic or interspecies concern. The heat of the morning intensified. The hippo had been out of the river now for almost 30 minutes, and I noticed the first signs of discomfort. Patches of dried skin darkened under the sun, and his movements slowed slightly. Hippos are not adapted for prolonged exposure to the heat outside water, and this made his actions even more extraordinary. Yet despite the fatigue beginning to show, he remained steadfast, a silent sentinel for the orphaned calf. Every time a lion made a tentative approach, he bellowed again, forcing the predators to retreat slightly, reassess, and regroup. In the distance, the faint sound of engines signaled that the reserve rangers were approaching. Relief surged through me, yet I knew the danger was not fully over. The lions were still present, still calculating, their instincts driving them to press the attack. But now the equation had changed. Human intervention, even indirect, introduced an unpredictable element that apex predators tend to respect. The hippo, sensing the approaching humans, did not flee immediately, but instead maintained his protective stance until the first distant figures of the elephant herd appeared on the horizon. The herd's arrival was almost cinematic. Led by a large female with a notched ear, they moved with purpose, trumpeting and rumbling as though aware of the urgency. The orphaned calf perked up at the sound, its little legs quivering with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and hope. I raised my camera again, capturing the first moment of recognition between the calf and its species. As the adults advanced, the lions, now facing both the protective hippo and an approaching herd, began to retreat, casting backward glances at the calf they had almost claimed. Even apex predators recognized the strategic disadvantage of being outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Remarkably, the hippo did not immediately return to the river. He remained beside the calf until the led female was within 50 yards, as if understanding that premature departure could leave the calf exposed. The matriarch slowed her pace, her trunk raised toward the hippo in a gesture that, in human terms, might have been described as acknowledgement or gratitude. Only then did he lumber back toward the water, moving with a cumbersome yet deliberate gait, eventually submerging himself beneath the river's surface. The baby elephant ran toward its herd, its trumpeting now high-pitched and joyful, a sound I will never forget. It was a moment of relief, survival, and hope, a rare intersection of instinct, courage, and perhaps something more profound. Japhet turned to me, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. Nature, he said softly, and sometimes defies all understanding. I could only nod, still focused on documenting every frame, knowing that this sequence of events was one of the most extraordinary I had ever witnessed. As the rangers approached, confirming the safety of the calf and the retreat of the lions, I felt a deep sense of purpose. Every photograph, every second of footage captured would serve as more than documentation. It would be evidence that nature's rules are sometimes more fluid than we think. It suggested possibilities beyond survival and predation, hinting at cognitive complexity, interspecies recognition, and perhaps a form of empathy or protective instinct not yet fully understood. Japhet and I remained for a few minutes longer, observing the calf as it reunited with its herd. The adults encircled it, trunk to trunk, providing reassurance and protection. The matriarch lingered near the mother's fallen body for a final moment, a ritual of acknowledgement that spoke volumes about memory, grief, and familial bonds in elephant society. Even for seasoned observers like us, these moments underscored the intricate intelligence and emotional depth present in wildlife. As the hippo finally disappeared beneath the water, leaving only occasional bubbles to mark its presence, I realized the scale of what we had witnessed. The day had begun as a routine drive, yet it had transformed into an unparalleled encounter with nature's unpredictability. In that brief window, the boundaries of predator and protector, prey and guardian, were rewritten. The baby elephant's survival hinged not only on instinct and species solidarity, but on an extraordinary act of interspecies intervention, one that I would spend the rest of my career reflecting upon. Even as we packed up to follow the herd and ensure the calf's continued safety, the impact of that morning reverberated in my mind. This was no longer simply a story about survival. It was a lesson in the complexity of wildlife behavior, the mysterious capacities of animals, and the moments when life defies expectation. Nature had delivered a miracle in the form of a hippo whose courage and awareness, for reasons we could only speculate, had rewritten a story of loss into one of hope. The tension in the savannah remained thick as the distant rumble of a ranger vehicle grew closer, its green frame bouncing across the uneven terrain. The lions, once confident and poised for the kill, now glanced repeatedly toward the approaching humans. Instinct and caution warred within them. Even apex predators, finely tuned to the rhythm of survival, are reluctant to confront threats they cannot fully assess. The hippo, still towering over the orphaned calf, seemed to sense that reinforcements were arriving, yet he did not move prematurely. Every second of his presence extended the margin of survival, and the calf remained pressed against his massive side, quivering with a mix of fear and relief. The lead ranger, Daniel Kiprop, coordinated with his team over the radio. Their mission was clear: ensure the lions were distracted or deterred until the elephant herd could reach the calf. I watched Japhet communicate silently with the rangers, his hand gestures precise, signaling both urgency and caution. The interplay of human strategy and animal behavior created a surreal tableau. A 3-ton hippo acting as protector, a pride of lions testing their limits, and now human intervention preparing to tip the scales. From the horizon, the elephant herd came into view. 11 adults, led by a large female with a distinctively notched ear, moved with a purposeful urgency. Their trumpeting and low-frequency rumbles carried across the dry savannah, signaling both distress and the rallying of protective instincts. The orphaned calf, eyes wide with recognition, stiffened and then began a tentative, unsteady approach toward the herd, guided by the hippo's unwavering presence. Its tiny legs wobbled, yet the determination in its movement was clear. The lions, caught between the advancing herd and the hippo, reassessed their options. Subadults shifted uneasily, flanking maneuvers halted, while the adult males paced with uncertainty. Apex predators, though formidable, are not immune to the dynamics of collective action. The elephant's sheer size, their coordinated movements, and the presence of the hippo created a scenario that even seasoned hunters could not risk. Reluctantly, the lions began to withdraw, casting lingering, wary glances at the calf they had almost claimed. For a moment, silence fell over the savannah, broken only by the trumpeting of the approaching herd. The hippo, Mafalme, did not immediately retreat to the safety of the river. He remained beside the calf until the matriarch of the herd was within 50 yards. This deliberate delay suggested a remarkable awareness. Leaving too early might expose the calf to residual danger or provoke hesitation in the adults approaching to reclaim their young. When the matriarch paused, raising her trunk in acknowledgement of the hippo, it was an extraordinary exchange, a silent recognition of protection and perhaps even respect between species. The baby elephant surged forward, joining its herd in a trembling yet jubilant reunion. The matriarch positioned herself over the calf, flaring her ears and rumbling low, a combination of reassurance and territorial assertion. Two adult females remained unusually close, flanking the calf as if to provide an extra layer of protection during this vulnerable transition. The fallen mother, still lying nearby, was acknowledged through trunk gestures, an almost ritualistic farewell from the matriarch, who seemed to both mourn and console simultaneously. I focused my lens, capturing the complex interactions, knowing that these moments conveyed a depth of social intelligence and emotional resonance that few humans would ever witness firsthand. The rangers, now closer, took up positions alongside our jeep, providing an additional layer of deterrence to the lions while ensuring the herd moved safely. One officer, a woman named Nuru, observed the scene with fascination. "Look at how the calf responds to Mafalme," she said quietly, nodding toward the submerged hippo. "It recognizes him as a protector." Oh, this was not conjecture. The calf's behavior, hesitation before the hippo, proximity while advancing, and the tactile gestures of its trunk suggested a cognitive recognition of an interspecies guardian, a phenomenon rarely documented in African wildlife. While the calf joined the herd, Mafalme lingered, maintaining a steady vigil. Each subtle movement, turning his head, adjusting his stance, or releasing a low rumble, appeared aimed at keeping the lions at bay. His eyes, small yet alert, scanned continuously, tracking every predator's move. It was remarkable not only for the protective behavior, but for the sustained focus. Hippos, though aggressive, rarely exhibit this kind of prolonged, directed attention outside of territorial disputes. Here he seemed almost consciously prioritizing the survival of an entirely different species. The herd's approach also demonstrated the sophisticated social intelligence of elephants. They did not rush blindly, but coordinated through subtle cues, trunk signals, low-frequency rumbles, and positional adjustments that communicated both urgency and caution. The matriarch, likely the grandmother of the orphaned calf, orchestrated the movement, ensuring the young elephant remained within the protective circle. The juxtaposition of these two remarkable behaviors, Mafalme's protective vigilance and the herd's strategic coordination, underscored the complexity of African wildlife. As the herd finally surrounded the calf, I felt a sense of awe wash over me. The matriarch gently touched the young elephant with her trunk, and two nearby females maintained close proximity, forming an impromptu protective ring. Meanwhile, the hippo, sensing that the immediate threat had diminished, began a slow, measured retreat toward the river. He paused briefly, turning his massive head toward the matriarch, and I could almost read a silent acknowledgement passing between the species. Mission accomplished, protection ensured. Then, with a powerful splash, Mafalme submerged beneath the water's surface, leaving only occasional bubbles to mark his presence. The orphaned calf, now safely enveloped by its herd, emitted a series of trumpets that were unmistakably joyful. I had photographed hundreds of elephant interactions, yet nothing captured the mixture of relief, recognition, and renewed confidence displayed in those few moments. The adults continued to circle, reassess, and finally integrate the calf fully back into the group, ensuring constant contact and security. Even the fallen mother received one final ritualistic acknowledgement, a testament to the matriarch's memory and understanding of familial bonds. In the aftermath, the rangers expressed amazement, both at the calf's survival and at the unusual interspecies cooperation they had witnessed. Daniel Kiprop, senior ranger, shook his head in disbelief. This behavior, hippo intervention, calf recognition, herd coordination, it's unprecedented in our records. I could only nod, realizing that what we had seen challenged not only conventional wisdom about predator-prey dynamics, but also assumptions regarding animal cognition, social intelligence, and perhaps even rudimentary empathy. The story of Mafalme and the orphaned calf would continue to unfold, but in that moment, the savannah held a rare stillness. The lions had retreated, the herd had regrouped, and the calf's life was preserved through a combination of instinct, courage, and seemingly deliberate intervention. Nature, in its harshness, had also delivered an extraordinary act of protection, rewriting the expected narrative of life and death in the African wilderness. Japhet and I spent a few additional minutes observing the herd from a safe distance. The calf, now fully integrated, remained flanked by attentive adults, occasionally glancing toward the river, perhaps sensing the presence of its temporary guardian. I captured each movement, aware that these images would serve as evidence of a rare and remarkable phenomenon, one that could inform future research on interspecies interactions, cognition, and behavior. As we finally prepared to leave, the landscape seemed transformed. The savanna, usually defined by a survival of the fittest, had provided a lesson in unpredictability, resilience, and the subtle threads of protection that sometimes cross the boundaries between species. Even seasoned observers like Japhet and I recognized that what we had witnessed was extraordinary. A hippo protecting an orphaned elephant from apex predators, a young elephant recognizing and trusting that intervention, and a herd mobilizing with precision to reclaim and safeguard its own. The echoes of the calf's trumpets lingered as we drove away, but the memory of Mafalme's intervention, the matriarch's calm authority, and the lion's cautious retreat would remain with me forever. This was not merely a story of survival, it was a narrative of courage, instinct, and an unexpected, almost miraculous alignment of behavior that defied conventional understanding. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the Mara River as I reviewed the images on my camera, still stunned by the morning's extraordinary events. Each frame captured the raw scale of the scene. Mafalme, the massive hippo, standing steadfast against a pride of lions, his body shielding a fragile baby elephant. As I zoomed in, the familiar notch in his right ear became unmistakable, a V-shaped mark that identified him clearly. Japhet leaned over my shoulder, his expression a mix of disbelief and fascination. "That's him," he whispered. "Mafalme. We've known him for years, but never like this." Mafalme was no ordinary hippo. Rangers had been monitoring him for nearly 7 years, noting his unusually tolerant behavior around elephants near his section of the river. While hippos are often aggressive and highly territorial, Mafalme had demonstrated a remarkable pattern of tolerance, allowing calves to approach and even play near his submerged body without aggression. Until today, this behavior had been seen as benign curiosity. What we witnessed, however, transcended tolerance. It was deliberate protection, a conscious interference in a predator-prey interaction entirely outside his own species. Curiosity turned to analysis as I discussed the incident with Ranger Nuru, who had observed the scene from a safe distance. "We call him Mafalme," she explained, which means king in Swahili. "He's always been dominant in this part of the river, but his behavior today, it's extraordinary. There's something about the way he understood the danger to the calf." Her words carried a mixture of scientific intrigue and awe, a reminder that even professionals can be humbled by nature's unpredictability. Nuru provided additional context from reserve records. 3 years prior, Mafalme had been observed near the site of a dead hippo calf. Rangers documented that the calf appeared to have been killed by lions. Though it was never confirmed whether Mafalme was the father, the timing coincided with the first recorded instances of his unusual tolerance toward elephants. Some senior researchers theorized that trauma from losing a calf might have influenced his behavior, creating a heightened sensitivity to the cries of young animals. It was a compelling idea, an emotional imprint from a personal loss extending across species lines. The possibility raised questions I had wrestled with for decades. As a wildlife photographer, I had learned to avoid anthropomorphizing animal behavior. Predators hunt, prey flee, social hierarchies govern interactions, and instincts guide survival. Yet here was an adult hippo acting in a way that appeared not only deliberate but protective, exhibiting awareness of threats in a calculated response designed to preserve the life of another species. I wondered if cognitive empathy, something scientists increasingly recognize in elephants, cetaceans, and primates, might extend in rare cases to hippos. To explore further, we spoke with Senior Ranger Daniel Kiprop. He had observed Mafalme over several years and was considered an authority on the river's ecosystem. Hippos and elephants share the water holes, he explained. They've evolved with an awareness of each other. But today, what we saw goes beyond interaction. He actively intervened. No textbook, no observation in any of the reserves has ever recorded this kind of behavior. His voice carried both excitement and caution, as if acknowledging the delicate balance between observation and interpretation. Intrigued, I spent the rest of the morning photographing the riverbank from a discreet distance, capturing Mafalme in his usual habitat. Even submerged, his presence was commanding. His eyes, ears, and nostrils protruded just above the water, yet there was an unmistakable aura of power and vigilance. I noticed that the elephant herd, particularly the orphaned calf, seemed to integrate him into their awareness. The calf approached the water cautiously, trunk extended, occasionally nudging Mafalme with tentative curiosity. The adults did not interfere, maintaining their usual social structures, but their acceptance of Mafalme's proximity was remarkable. It suggested a recognition of an ally, a protective presence, even if the interaction was not yet fully understood. Over the next few days, I worked closely with Nuru and the reserve's research team to piece together a behavioral profile. Mafalme exhibited deliberate positioning, strategic movement to block predators, and sustained attention to the calf's location. These actions were not random, they were purposeful. Hippos, though capable of aggression, typically display such precision only in territorial disputes or mating competition. The deliberate cross-species intervention implied either an advanced cognitive processing or a profound instinctual response triggered by previous experience. To explore the possibility of learned behavior, we examined historical footage and ranger logs. Mafalme's interactions with elephants had always been unusual, calves splashing near him, adults approaching cautiously without triggering aggression. These observations, previously dismissed as curiosity or tolerance, now seemed to be part of a larger behavioral pattern. Perhaps Mafalme had developed an implicit understanding of safety and risk for young animals, a capacity that emerged from environmental pressures and personal experience. The notion was both scientific and poetic. A hippo who, through years of survival and loss, had evolved a form of guardianship. The orphaned calf, whom we had come to know as Tumini, meaning hope in Swahili, continued to thrive under the herd's care. Yet the calf's reliance on Mafalme during the initial crisis appeared to influence subsequent behavior. Tumini displayed a unique willingness to approach the river and engage with Mafalme's presence, a behavior not observed in typical calves. The herd, in turn, adjusted their movement patterns, staying closer to the river, subtly accommodating Mafalme's territory. This interspecies adaptation was unprecedented, a dynamic in which a predator-aware strategy, a protective herbivore, and a social elephant group converged in a complex network of behavior and trust. Dr. Leon Nandungu, a wildlife behaviorist from the University of Nairobi, arrived shortly thereafter to formalize the observation. Reviewing my photographs and the ranger reports, Dr. Nandungu emphasized the significance. What you documented challenges our understanding of hippo behavior. It suggests cognitive and emotional capabilities that we have not adequately appreciated. This is an extraordinary opportunity to study interspecies protection and the potential for complex social awareness. She planned a long-term observational study using non-invasive methods, monitoring both Mafalme and Tumini, focusing on interactions that could reveal patterns in protective behavior. The research also highlighted the broader implications for wildlife conservation. Mafalme's actions had prevented the premature death of a vulnerable calf, altering the natural trajectory of the herd. In doing so, he demonstrated that individual animal behavior can profoundly influence ecosystem dynamics. Observing such interactions could inform strategies for conservation, particularly in regions affected by poaching and habitat encroachment. Protecting key individuals, like Mafalme, whose behavior transcends conventional expectations, might have cascading benefits for the broader ecological community. As I packed my equipment each evening, preparing for the return to Nairobi, I reflected on the dual lens through which this story could be viewed. Western science would seek to explain the behavior through trauma response, adaptive intelligence, or evolutionary advantage. The Masai perspective, which Japhet shared, offered another view. Animals carry spirits, sometimes manifesting protection when the world seems at its harshest. Mafalme, in that light, was not just a hippo. He was a guardian, a force of nature that embodied resilience, awareness, and perhaps even the echo of ancestral spirit. Each day spent observing the river and the herd reinforced the uniqueness of the interaction. Tumini's confidence grew, Mafalme's tolerance remained consistent, and the herd adjusted subtly, creating a living example of behavioral adaptation. It was a phenomenon that could not be fully captured in words, photographs, or even scientific theory. Instead, it had to be witnessed, felt, and documented meticulously. The intersection of instinct, intelligence, and perhaps empathy in this scenario suggested a broader truth about the natural world. Survival is not merely about predation and defense. It can also encompass cooperation, protection, and unexpected alliances that defy conventional understanding. Mafalme's actions, the herd's response, and Tumini's reliance formed a triad of interdependent behavior, each influencing the other in profound and unanticipated ways. By the time I returned to Nairobi, I carried with me not only photographs, but a renewed perspective on wildlife. In the savannah, survival is paramount, but compassion, whether instinctual, learned, or inexplicable, can emerge even among the most formidable of creatures. Mafalme's intervention was more than a singular act of protection. It was a living testament to the complexity and unpredictability of the natural world, a reminder that extraordinary behavior often emerges when least expected. Weeks passed in the Masai Mara, yet the memory of that morning, the day when a hippo became a guardian, remained vivid in my mind. Returning daily to observe the elephant herd in Mafalme, I began to notice subtleties that confirmed the lasting impact of the extraordinary rescue. Tumini, the orphaned calf, now moved with a confidence that had not been present before. The trauma of losing her mother still lingered, evident in the occasional hesitation or tentative trunk gestures. But the collective protection of her herd, coupled with the implicit assurance provided by Mafalme, allowed her to thrive in ways that defied expectations for a calf in such circumstances. The herd itself exhibited remarkable adaptations. Typically, elephants range widely in search of food, their movements dictated by water availability, seasonal growth, and predation risk. Yet in the aftermath of the incident, I observed a subtle but significant shift. The adults adjusted their patterns to remain closer to the river, seemingly to ensure Mafalme's presence as a safety buffer. This interspecies dynamic, an adult hippo influencing the spatial behavior of a complex elephant social group, was unprecedented. It suggested a new level of awareness among the herd, a recognition that survival could benefit from alliances beyond their species. One morning I arrived to witness an interaction that struck me as profoundly significant. The elephant herd approached the river, Tumini among them. Normally, calves stay at a cautious distance, monitored closely by their mothers or attendants. But this time, Tumini separated slightly from the adults and approached the partially submerged Mafalme. She extended her trunk, testing the water and the hippo's reaction. Mafalme remained immobile, a silent sentinel, seemingly allowing the calf's curiosity and trust. The matriarch watched closely but made no move to retrieve Tumini. After several minutes, Tumini returned to the herd, her brief encounter with Mafalme, a gesture of acknowledgement or recognition. Ranger Nuru, observing alongside me, remarked quietly, "It almost looks like the calf is thanking him." I could not disagree. The week-long observations yielded a pattern that went beyond simple tolerance or curiosity. Mafalme consistently tolerated Tumini's approach and maintained his vigilance when predators were nearby. On one occasion, a lone lioness ventured closer than usual to the herd's water edge, but Mafalme's low bellowing and deliberate positioning caused her to retreat without confrontation. The hippo had established a behavioral code recognized both by the calf and the adults. The interactions were subtle yet powerful, illustrating a rare instance where instinct, awareness, and perhaps past experience created a protective dynamic across species lines. Beyond the riverbank, the story of Tumini and Mafalme spread among conservation circles. Leon Nandungu, a wildlife behaviorist from the University of Nairobi, arrived to begin a formal observational study. Her team installed non-invasive cameras and monitored both the herd and Mafalme to document interspecies behavior and social learning. Preliminary findings suggested that elephants, long recognized for their cognitive complexity, were capable of incorporating knowledge of an entirely different species into their decision-making, a remarkable example of adaptive intelligence. Mafalme, in turn, demonstrated patience and vigilance, behaviors consistent with protective intent rather than random tolerance. For me, the narrative was deeply personal as well as professional. 20 years of photographing the African savanna had shown me countless interactions: predator hunts, courtship displays, territorial disputes, and family bonds. Yet nothing had prepared me for the intricate web of protection, trust, and recognition that unfolded between Mafalme and Tumini. It challenged the boundaries of my understanding, forcing me to reconsider assumptions about instinct, empathy, and the complexity of animal social systems. My photographs, which would later be published in National Geographic and shared with the conservation researchers, were more than documentation. They were evidence of a living experiment in interspecies cooperation. One day, as I watched Tumini play near the river with the herd at a respectful distance from Mafalme, I reflected on the long-term implications. Elephants are known to grieve, to remember, and to teach their young. Mafalme's intervention might influence not only Tumini's development, but also her social learning within the herd. The calf had experienced protection from a species outside her own, a rare and profound event likely to leave lasting cognitive impressions. The adult's integration of this experience into herd behavior suggested a flexible, responsive intelligence that transcended routine survival strategies. At the same time, Mafalme returned to his usual patterns in the river, mostly submerged, yet his presence remained a silent stabilizer. The hippo's behavior indicated a balance between risk and awareness. He had acted decisively to protect the calf, but returned to normal routines once the immediate threat was resolved. This combination of intervention and self-preservation highlighted the delicate equilibrium of instincts that govern survival while allowing for extraordinary deviation when conditions, or perhaps memory and experience, dictate. Japhet, ever thoughtful, offered a perspective that resonated deeply. "We Masai believe that animals carry spirits," he said one evening as the sun dipped behind acacia trees. "Sometimes these spirits act when they sense danger." Mafalme, perhaps he carries such a spirit, one that recognized the need to protect the young. In the ancient landscape of the savanna, where life and death unfold in daily cycles, this perspective felt as valid as any scientific explanation. The coexistence of empirical observation and spiritual interpretation added depth to the story, enriching my understanding of both the animals and the cultural context in which we observed them. Over subsequent weeks, I documented recurring interactions that underscored the ongoing influence of Mafalme. Tumini's confidence near the river grew steadily, and the adults, though maintaining typical vigilance, displayed relaxed postures when the hippo was present. These patterns suggested that the event was not an anomaly, but had instilled new behavioral norms within the herd. The elephants appeared to have recalibrated their risk assessment, integrating Mafalme's presence as part of their environmental awareness, a remarkable demonstration of adaptive learning and cross-species recognition. The story of Tumini, her herd, and Mafalme also attracted the attention of international conservationists. Researchers debated the implications of interspecies protection, discussing whether such behaviors could indicate rudimentary forms of empathy, evolved risk assessment, or learned social cooperation. The observations challenged long-held assumptions about hippocognition and the limits of behavioral plasticity in large mammals. Each photograph, each video clip, served as a catalyst for further study, inviting both curiosity and reconsideration of what is possible in the natural world. In reflecting on the entire sequence, I recognized a profound lesson. Life in the wild is governed by instinct, necessity, and chance, but it is also punctuated by moments that transcend expectation. Mafalme's intervention was not scripted by human logic, nor by conventional ecological models. It was an unpredictable act that combined awareness, timing, and perhaps experience, reshaping the fate of a single calf and influencing the behavior of an entire herd. Tumini's survival was not guaranteed by numbers or brute force of morningdom. It was the result of courage, strategy, and the unexpected kindness, or at least protective instinct, of a massive, solitary hippo. As I prepared to leave the Mara for Nairobi, I took one last set of photographs of Mafalme and the herd. Too many, now integrated fully, moved confidently within the protective circle of adults. Mafalme, partially submerged, regarded the group with steady vigilance before retreating beneath the water. The savanna once again fell into its natural rhythm, yet the story of that morning lingered, a reminder that in the harshest landscapes, moments of compassion and protection could emerge from the most unexpected sources. Returning to the city, I reflected on the broader implications for conservation, research, and human understanding of the animal mind. Observing this behavior had expanded my comprehension of interspecies dynamics, of instinctual flexibility, and of the possibility that large mammals may act in ways that challenge scientific conventions. Tumini thrived, Mafalme maintained his domain, and the herd adapted to new realities, all of which illuminated the resilience, intelligence, and surprising capacity for protection in the natural world. In the end, the Maasai wisdom and modern science converged. Animals, guided by instincts and possibly spirits, can act in ways that defy expectation, yet resonate with the universal principles of survival and care. Mafalme's actions, Tumini's recovery, and the herd's behavioral adaptation provide a story of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary capacities that lie hidden within the wild. My photographs, now shared with researchers and published widely, ensure that this story is not merely anecdotal. It is a documented testament to the mysteries and marvels of African wildlife. Even now, whenever I recall that morning, I am reminded that survival is only part of nature's narrative. Courage, vigilance, adaptation, and what appears remarkably like compassion can emerge in the unlikeliest of forms. The Masai Mara had offered me a story not just of life saved, but of the deep, interconnected intelligence that governs the creatures of the savanna. A lesson in hope, humility, and the unpredictable beauty of the natural world.